I've had a pretty unusual, I'd describe it as a bit of a circuitous career, Adam, I think. And part of that comes from not really knowing what you want to do when you grow up. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I wasn't quite a straight A student then. I fell into doing microbiology, and I must say, I can't recall much about that now, all these decades later.
Did you fancy working in a lab?
I don't think so, no. That's the thing that put me off. I think processing samples with a hangover in Newcastle's labs wasn't for me at all. So yeah, my first career really was in recruitment. And I had a fantastic time doing that role, really exciting start to the career. But I was always thinking of what was going to come next. And it's a struggle, really. You're always thinking in iterations. There was something that I was sort of hankering for, which I guess is something about making an impact. And a lot of this sort of stems from working, listening to my mum when she was alive. And she had a fascinating background. She was a Yorkshire lass. Her mum was a nurse. Her father was the local policeman. And she became a nurse and then a midwife and became a health visitor. And as a single mum, she raised me and my brother up. And she went on to do amazing things. She was a skydiver. She reached the very upper echelons of the National Health Service, and a great inspiration. And she always had a sort of adage in her life around, you can't change the world, but you can make a difference in the corner of the world you occupy, which always stuck with me. Yeah. And I think a lot of this comes from find some pursuit of mission and purpose in life and your career. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it takes you a long time to find it. I'm always inspired by some younger colleagues that seem to have found that flow. So anyway, I had an interesting pivot out of recruitment, ended up saying yes to doing a project in West Africa in the Ebola outbreak.
Did that terrify you?
No, I was looking for something that was going to shock me out of my career rut. Something to, one big step into the unknown. And before I knew it, I was in Sierra Leone.
An Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone sounds like it'd shock anybody out of anything, really.
I certainly did that. But, when you're on the ground floor there, you're at the grassroots, I think, seeing the impact of the work you have, it is inspiring.
Yeah.
And we made a difference. And we worked in Sierra Leone, Guinea, Liberia, Senegal. And I think when you're going through a career transition, you're looking for, I think, in my opinion, the biggest, boldest step you can possibly do. And that certainly was that. Yeah. Now, not sustainable long-term with a young family, and they're quite dangerous. But it was the thing I needed to say, listen, it's not the thing, but it's probably a step in the right direction towards the new thing.
It's probably the closest thing to a war zone you could have possibly gone without going to a war zone, though.
Yeah, it was pretty bold as a choice.
How long were you there?
It was only about 4 months or so.
Yeah.
But enough to realise that it was time to take a step into something new. And that's really where...
Were you married at the time?
Yeah.
How did your other half feel about that?
Yeah, she checked the life insurance was in place first.
I bet.
Wished me on my way. But she knew I needed to take some big steps to reinvent my career. So that was...
a very supportive partner then.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I guess you need that really to kick on and do the sorts of things that you've done.
I think so. So that was a sort of big step. And I do get the chance now to coach a lot of people on their own career transition and big steps they're taking. Be bold. Don't just go for the most obvious adjacent step. And really
take a little bit of calculated risk.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I ended up at PwC 10 years ago and working in sort of HR resourcing field for a year. But this, as you said, it coincided a decade ago with, I guess, the previous hype curve in AI. We'd seen some breakthroughs in applications in things like cancer. We'd seen some interesting things applied by British companies looking at gaming and applications beyond that as well. And a number of big corporations made the jump. They had a go at doing this, and I think that was the chance for me to lean in, find a way into that space, leading on thing of sort of the people adoption side of it.
Yeah.
But I think
it was a stuttering start, wasn't it?
Looking back at enterprise AI 10 years ago, there was promise, but you were lacking a number of the crucial raw ingredients. The data quality and scale wasn't there. The compute power wasn't there. The techniques, the whole approach to it just wasn't.
The legislation wasn't there. I mean, I came unstuck with Alphabot, the business that I started around about the time we were talking on a lot of panels together. We were making a cancer diagnosis tool. So similar to you, it was the healthcare angle with my mum being a nurse as well that really inspired me.
Yeah.
But we just ran into regulatory issues, and it was like a bit of a stuttering start from that point of view. Lots of really good early promise, clearly capability with the systems that were being designed at the time, but perhaps a little bit ahead of the time from a point of actually being able to roll something out and the use cases. And
I think that's right. I think there was a lot of issues. There's a lot of barriers to scaling it. And that it was worth having a go, because what you learn in those experiments is worth retaining, and there's ways you can take that on to progressing your efforts in the future. So as a consequence, though, I would describe it as the requirement for insight by business leaders and boards didn't diminish. I think people had a feeling it was going to have an impact down the track. As a consequence, you had the chance to lead a lot of our comms and sort of messaging into the market for many years.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've probably been around about 40 countries now speaking about this, and joining various advisory boards. I was one of the founding board members of the all-party parliamentary group on AI, looking at the policy implications of this. So it was a really vibrant sector in the UK in that sort of phase, about 10 up to about 5 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And that certainly saw me have some interesting conversations, TED Talks, and hitting the circuit with gusto, and finding that as a new skill set.
It was an interesting move, not just for you, but for the company that you still work for, PwC, as well, wasn't it?
Well, part of it is reading your own homework in many respects. We'd had some really seminal, high-profile research out, and this dog's are going to knock the cameraman over in a minute.
So she's Rusty.
No, sorry, he's Rusty. That's Mabel.
Mabel.
Yeah,
right.
Mabel's 3, and he's 5. And
did you get him from the same breeder?
No, they weren't actually. No, so he was pre-lockdown, and then my wife, I think I'd been back at the office. She was working at home.
Yeah.
And he'd been sat there next to her all day. She made the mortal mistake and said, "Oh, Rusty looks so bored today." So all
Get him a friend.
Yeah, no, she didn't say that. That's all the motivation that I needed to go straight out and get another puppy that weekend. And now we have this lunatic.
Yeah, us blokes don't need much motivation to come by a puppy.
No, exactly right. So
we need permission, not motivation.
Yeah. But honestly, these guys, I do a little bit on social media, as you know, and people say, "Rob, can you do a little bit less work content and more dog content?" So I have to deliberately insert some dog content into my feed these days, because they want to see Rusty and Mabel.
They're so cute. Foresight from yourself to get involved in AI at that point, but also from the business as well. Yeah. What was the thought process there to be so far ahead of the curve?
Well, we'd had quite a lot of research and analysis out around that time that was quite seminal, was quite influential in the market. So we'd had a very high-profile report on the impact of jobs driven by AI automation. The headline back in those days, we were forecasting that about 30% of UK jobs would be affected by AI in the years to come. A very high-profile survey we did looking at the economic impact from productivity globally to drive growth. Some huge eye-watering numbers that were forecasted in the sort of year or two ahead. And really, there's the whole approach to knowing that unless you disrupt yourself, you'll be disrupted too. And tech was going to be the heartbeat of every single thing we do. It's an enabler for every single service offering, every part of the business, every sector we operate within. So it's a necessity to make that pivot, I think, in those years. And that's really starting to continue to scale. So yeah, as someone trying to translate this, that was the next mission for me, and realizing that the potential for the tech was going to be so profound. And thinking back to then personal lived experience, looking back to then, unfortunately, having lost my mother to motor neuron disease, which, if you know much about, is
my grandma.
Horrendous illness, as you know. There's Doddy Weir. We've seen many other luminaries in the last few years afflicted by this, and in that disease alone, which is terminal still, there's huge promise with AI to uncover novel approaches to treatment and to mitigating the risk of it, etc. So you start thinking, hang on, if there's a case of planting your flag against something that's got purpose and mission in the world, this is going to be profound.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Little old me ain't going to have a huge implication.
But if you can just have a little bit,
just a little bit, then that feels like something you get out of bed for in the morning. Yeah, that was it really.
And how has that driven things for you over the last few years in terms of like purpose for yourself and like leadership as well, and the way that you help and advise people that report into you?
I think a lot about leadership, and I think a lot about followership. How do you engender that ability to create a movement to take people on this journey? Because it's going to be a big seismic shift in workforce in business in the years to come. And the best leaders are going to be the ones that can communicate clearly with authenticity and ability to build trust in their workforces. Ever more than ever before, this is going to be a primary virtue. And I think the way I've seen leadership skills evolve is that whilst there's always talk about the impact of automation of the tech, I think those very human skills are actually the ones that are going to be essential for us to navigate this in the years to come. So I'm an optimist around this tech, Adam. I think the opportunities are huge. I'm sure we can talk about the downside, the risks, the other side of the equation. So everything I'm about is trying to move the dial across to this side of the credit column.
Yeah.
But at the heart of that is good leadership, is the best workforce possible, upskilled and empowered to do their work better than ever before.
And doing work that people enjoy as well,
and
work that's higher value. I think we talked at one of the panels that we talked on a couple of years ago, and I think I said that there's very few children aged 7 in primary schools around the world who want to work in an insurance call centre. It's like, that's probably not the dream for a lot of people, but there's probably a lot of people that must, and that's where they end up. But if you're in that sort of position, and that ends up being one of the roles that ends up becoming taken over more and more by artificial intelligence, then what are the value add things that we can teach people, that we can train people to do as we sort of progress through this, and we mitigate the risks and make sure that people are still adding value. I think the CEO report, CEO survey that PwC brought out a few weeks ago talked about how companies that are leveraging AI have become 34% more profitable. They're looking at hiring more staff. So the early signs are quite optimistic when we look at the companies that are actually taking the risk, leveraging it, looking to the future. And then we also see things like organisations talking about needing to reinvent themselves. And I think the figure was quite high, wasn't it? It was about 60% of companies feel.
Yeah, let's just put a bit of a framer on this. So why are we even talking about this? It's not just pet hobby looking at this emerging tech. The burning platform is evident. So this CEO survey we launched at Davos, at the World Economic Forum, for the last 27 years plus, really looks at a number of big questions. And the one we've been looking at in recent years has been, to what extent will your company as a CEO be economically viable in 10 years' time on its current trajectory? Now, last year, 21% of the CEOs we surveyed said that they would not be viable within 10 years if they stayed on this course. That's gone up to 34% of CEOs this year that realise that they have to substantially change their business model and reinvent their organisation to stay viable in the years to come. And how do you do that? You've got levers to pull, haven't you? But at the heart of this is how you adopt the best technology to think about how do you solve the hardest problems, improve your customers' experience, and think about your growth ability to create value. And AI absolutely is seen as the central lever to pull in the years to come to do that. So that's the sort of the background to this. On the other side, though, I think there's a lot of talk about AI in the workplace. And the reason why we're talking about it so much more now in the last 2 years compared to when we were talking 10 years about this is that it is in people's hands now. It's in people's phones. People have experienced the technology. They've started to use it for their own benefits. And if anything, they're entering the workplace demanding that sort of capability within their enterprise stack.
Well, like you said, people using that in everyday life. Whether it be recommendation engines or whether it be sort of playing with ChatGPT for various different reasons, whether it's recipes or whatever in the personal life. Like, I go to meetings now and I'll speak to a C-level executive about something we're looking at in the enterprise. But then they'll talk to me about themselves using ChatGPT and how it's been so much more useful. And immediately, you know that at that level, that conversation is going to move a lot more quickly because they're actually seeing the benefits in their day-to-day. And understanding, well, actually, maybe we can apply it to this use case or this problem that we've got in the organisation, or to make people more productive.
That's right. And I think what you're finding now is that it's the CEO themselves that are driving this. So our latest survey showed that I think nearly half of them are directly sponsoring transformation programs now, which has gone up considerably in the years come by, because they themselves are touching this tech. It reminds me a little bit of the sort of the breakthrough moment for me a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, was this is a topic that, as you know, it's been hard to talk about in years gone by because people have to imagine it. It doesn't jump off a slide deck.
Well, not everybody's got that sort of foresight and vision though, have they? Like sometimes you actually need to show somebody something of substance before the penny will drop. That's
very much what we're trying to do with our place now around sort of show, not tell. But once it's in people's hands, that level of public consciousness increased substantially. I had a chance to join a I think BBC 5 Live Breakfast about 18 months ago for a chat there. And good interview talking about these sort of topics. And at the end, they asked me if I use this in my life more generally. And I said, well, actually, I do use it with my daughter, who was 7 at the time, to write her bedtime stories because mine are so bad. And we had a nice bit of conversation about this. And then I heard my name mentioned on primetime breakfast radio about an hour later. And what I can only describe unfolded was them describing this as either a superb productivity hack for a busy father or a dereliction of my ethical duties as a parent, which not what you want to be hearing at lifetime. No, but, you know, therefore the people bit I keep coming back to is so essential, isn't it? You know, the boards now have to be substantially more digitally savvy than they have been. Opportunity and risk. The workforce coming in is demanding this. Your workforce in flight is going to have to get very fluent with this very quickly, because it's going to embed in every single workflow, every tool they're operating, and therefore it's no longer a nice to have, it's a needs must.
Yeah, the figure I saw coming out of Davos last month was a 17% uptick in productivity from people using just the fundamental tools that we've got now, the ChatGPTs, the Geminis, the other AI tools that are out there. So I think realistically, organisations that aren't jumping on board with that now, they're going to get left behind at a really increasingly difficult rate to catch back up with.
I think that's right. What's interesting though on the CEO survey data from this year, Adam, is that actually confidence has just tailed off a little bit around the impact of Gen AI in CEOs' organisations. So what we might have seen into, I guess, describe it as year 2 of Gen AI is maybe sort of cooling off of the hype curve. The reality now hits home around how do you actually get this technology working? How do you scale it in production? And how do you do this in a way that's directly impacting for the positive profitability and productivity? Now, confidence in that figure's just tailed off a bit for the year ahead. And this brings to life, you know, what are the essential factors you need? So what have we got on the to-do list? Clearly, we've discussed workforce readiness, essential. C-suite and board savvy and fluency, essential. The right level of maturity on your cloud transformation journey, the right data strategy, and critically the right governance in place when it comes to the guardrails to do this safely, ethically, in a way that builds trust with your customers and your workforce at large.
Yeah, and I guess more CEOs are worried about things like hallucinations, regulatory, compliance issues, etc. So I think that's all got to be taken into consideration. I think there's always the excitement, isn't there, in the early days of these kinds of technology shifts. But then, like you said, the reality sort of sets in, and then the risks start to become apparent, and then everything just kind of slows down. And I think that's probably where we are now in year 2 of this.
I think so. And if you're thinking about the applications of this tech, and it's starting to move into use cases that have got profound consequence, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in financial services, whether it's in defence, you name it. There's things that are non-trivial that require substantial security and the right guardrails in place. And if anything, this comes back to this human equation around, if anything, we now need the greatest human talent available to hold this tech to account, to put the guardrails in place, and to make sure it's delivering what we need out of it with us in control. Well, I think you've got to look at the reality on the ground for your business leaders at the moment. You know, this is a market at the moment that's forcing people's minds on the here and now, on cost, on productivity, on efficiencies, and some of that ability to look further out is impacted at the moment. Their minds are focused on the here and now, and that certainly comes through in our CEO survey around CEOs' desire to wish they could spend more time looking out longer term than they can at the moment.
They don't stay in situ that
well,
long
there's a tenure issue as well, of course, isn't there? So you can understand why people are consumed with getting that now. And we do have a profound productivity drag, certainly in this country. You can understand why businesses are focusing on that beyond anything else at the moment.
I just think the economic situation forces it anyway, doesn't it?
It is, absolutely right. And if anything, this is a forcing factor that's going to see adoption move quite quickly. But I don't know, I'd probably agree, there's probably not as much thinking of the what next that we probably might need to think about at the moment. It's let's prove this stuff works, let's have some benefits from it, and give us a platform then to reinvent.
That's the thing though, isn't it? It's step at a time. If you get the optimization and the cost reductions today, then at least you're here tomorrow for the reinvestment, the new roles, the different roles, the increased productivity. But I think as an opportunity to be able to cost save right now,
Yep.
and for those like today problems. Whereas AI's kind of seemed like a 10 years time problem. It is actually today, isn't it?
It is. That's right. And I think when we were talking about this 10 years ago, it felt very much like the
Off in
future,
distance.
didn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was an interesting and sometimes fun and slightly scary conversation. But this is real now.
Yeah.
Literally have 10, 20 conversations a day about AI now, and making sense of it. How do you get started? How do you scale this? What are the key considerations? So people have to go through this journey, I think, up front, and buy themselves the time to think about the longer term. But it's moving so fast, isn't it? If you think about the developments literally in the space of recent months, your head is spinning as a corporate exec, thinking, how do I make sure that I'm sufficiently agile to course correct, not too deterministically setting my track this way?
And I think 10 years ago, when people were talking about building their own version of an AI or their own version of a chatbot, it's become very abundantly clear to me in the last 12 months that building on the platforms, the open AIs, the Google platforms, the Geminis and that kind of thing, so because their iterations are so fast, if you're a small business, you're just not going to keep up with that baseline fundamental platform level of the tech. But I think you can probably do a lot within the use cases, and I think that's potentially where a lot of those additional roles and businesses are probably going to come from, is the people and the companies that understand how to leverage the bigger players and find those unique business cases that they're never going to have time to work on.
That's exactly right. And this is where that deep understanding of the nuances of specific sectors in different jurisdictions, different contexts is so important to then align with the technology itself. And that's certainly what we focus on, is bringing the best of these technology partners in and leveraging that ability to know everything we need to know about the specific sector and the circumstances they're facing, and identify the useful things to solve it with, because there are thousands of things you can apply it to. And then again, your head is spinning of where do you get started. So practical guidance to make sure that you can move the dial on this.
And I think, I don't know what your thoughts are, but my advice to all the enterprise clients in particular that I speak to is start now.
Yeah.
But I think by waiting 5 years to see where things are going to be at, you'll be so far behind.
I think that's right. I mean, there's no excuse not to be in this now. You know, the price point, the entry point is negligible now.
Yeah.
So you should not be forestalling this. But there's ways of equipping your people to get busy with this as well. The best ideas come from your organization. That's very much what we did, is treating ourselves at PwC as client zero. And we know the best problems to solve are owned by the people on the front line. And that was the first thing we did, was effectively a big crowdsourcing operation that sought to basically get people to submit their best problems into the portal, the innovation platform. And then we can categorize and aggregate and rank them accordingly to work out the best things to apply our sort of limited skills. You know, a number of people is not unlimited in terms of this AI skills in an organization. And in doing so, you can bring the workforce with you into that journey if their problems are the ones you're solving.
You've got the critical mass at the coalface as well, haven't you? Is it about I want to say 300,000 people, but it's
360,000 globally.
Yeah. So it's a huge number of people at the coalface, like playing about with these problems. So
exactly.
You've really got that spread and nuance as well in each of these different areas.
Where we are today is effectively prehistoric from what it'll look like in 5 to 10 years time. And therefore, on both supply and demand, the advances we're almost certainly going to see in the years ahead are going to be extraordinary. So on supply, clearly there's already a huge amount of talk about, SMRs, small modular reactors, to drive more nuclear. The various other supply side innovations will continue to come through. And on demand, more efficient, lighter models, different techniques already starting to show promise. We're seeing this. So I'm not so sure. I think this is, if you think about large language models, it's only literally been 2 and a bit years since they've really started seeing full scale, which is no time at all. So imagine 10 years time, I suspect techniques for both supply and demand on energy and those considerations will probably be ameliorated somewhat.
Yeah, and I think the advantage from the computational ability of the models today, they're still fairly rudimentary, aren't they? There's still a lot of hallucination. They're not quite solving the problems. And from a hallucination point of view, they do. I mean, I've certainly noticed when I'm doing research into various organisations, think it's found an answer. So I think that human in the loop is super important as well.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And this really comes around to those critical skills I think that humans require, and the need for that human in the loop or on the loop, as we sometimes talk about these days. And therefore, what actually makes up a technology team, I think, is different. I mean, it's literally, 5 years ago, we were saying that in all these panels we did, we always get the question from the audience, don't we, about, what should I tell my kids to be when they grow up? It was always coding, programming.
And you could.
That's 5 years ago.
I mean, I was at an event probably only 3 years ago in Manchester, and the biggest problem was they couldn't get coders.
Sure. We've already seen the change in technology teams. I think about my teams, they've got skills ranging from the arts and humanities. We've got people with ability to work in the ethics field. We're looking at the geopolitical constructs of these and all manner of different regulatory requirements. So our tech teams are already changed beyond comparison to literally 5 years ago, which is exciting for me because I think this is what inspires people from all walks of life to enter the trade. And this, for me, means that the greater aperture of people looking at technology careers, the better and bigger it is, the more likely it is we get people that can represent their communities, society at large, and customers, and that produces better product. And I don't demur from thinking that's quite a positive outlook. Of course it is, but it makes it better. It asks harder questions. It brings different skills to the table and allows us to move out of this slightly homogenous thinking around tech. So this question of the public awareness thing is crucial now, Adam. I think back to when I was in the all-party parliamentary group several years ago, run by Lord Clement Jones, and we're always asking about why there were not more members of Parliament that wanted to partake in the dialogue. And some of the MPs said, listen, these topics at the time were not things that people are knocking on my door at the surgery to talk about. Making it real for society is critical. The way this is going to impact lives is crucial. And I think this also depicts in how it's represented in public, in popular culture. The imagery used is either very utopian or very dystopian, whether it's the Terminator. There's a real issue I've got with the sort of the tropes attached to it. And it's normally a kind of a white robot explaining something to a human, sort of mansplaining, whatever it might be. If you go onto Shutterstock or something like that. So there's some terrific work being done by a non-profit called Better Images of AI that looks at responsible, informative ways of actually depicting the technology so people can sort of consume it and understand it better than being scared or slightly hyped into following the topic. So, and this is therefore a crucial part that the media plays into this, the creative arts plays into this topic to sort of frame the conversation better than it has been done so far, to make it more real to people, to understand the impacts on their lives, how it's going to make life better, but to do this in a way that encourages them to upskill so they know how to mitigate the risks, of which there are several, aren't there?
There are, yeah.
Whether it's around cybersecurity, whether it's around trust or the hallucinations, as you talk about. We need people to actively upskill, understand what they're dealing with now, because this is embedding into just about every system that's going to affect their lives going forward.
And I suppose a starting point for anybody thinking about upskilling is back to the early part of our conversation where you're talking about purpose. This is the one big opportunity. The limits are almost boundless or really limited by your imagination, your intellect and your willingness to try something new. The opportunities are out there. The difficulty, I think, for people, as much as it is for businesses, is like figuring out that use case. I think those early conversations that we had with enterprises 10 years ago were like, AI, what can I do with it? Well, I think the individual out there now who's not fully like aware of what's going on with it and has only seen these headline newspaper stories of the utopian / usually dystopian future.
But it's more learning agility, isn't it? It's curiosity. It's a desire and a joy in the concept of learning. And that's the thing we need to engender. Yes, of course, there's specific technical upskilling we need to embed better into the schooling system, into higher education, crucially into lifelong learning. So it's not dropping off at your 18 or 21 point. So it's embedded throughout people's careers. But I think because we can't forecast as accurately at all what those skills are going to be required in 5 years, let alone 10 or 15, to be too fixed in terms of that destination is a risk. Therefore, the learning agility piece, that love of learning, love of lifelong learning, is the thing we have to foster and sustain and nurture going forward.
So one of my favourite words, curiosity. Is that the thing that we really need to sort of certainly teach younger people and people that might need to reskill further down the line?
I think so. And this tool in of itself is something that can help to drive people's curiosity in terms of the power and the savviness of it itself. But it's a bit glib to say this word. It's often used, isn't it? But without it, I can't see how we're not going to exploit the massive opportunities this will bring to bear to apply this to some of these big problems we've been speaking about today.
Yeah, a toolkit of AI platforms that you can use within your role to make you more productive is probably the best advice I could give to anybody. What are your thoughts on that, and what advice would you give somebody in this new age of AI?
As an individual or a worker, I mean, the good news is now that the tech is accessible. It's the simplest thing in the world now to have a play around with it in basic features mode, and just try it. I think when you've tried it in the context of something relevant to you, you do get that aha moment. One of my colleagues talks about the AI aha moment that comes to life specifically within your domain. Now, what's the big risk here is people start using their own device on workforce data or corporate data. And this is back to the employer's key piece of advice. If you are not allowing access to these tools to your workers, they're using it. They're absolutely using it. So
switching on the do not train model setting in ChatGPT is absolutely vital to sandbox anything that might be company IP.
I mean, even my kids' school has a generative AI policy now. There's no excuse for business leaders not to be thinking about what
we certainly do where I work.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not hard to put one in place. So know that your people in the main are going to start working with it and therefore make it available to them. And that's where the innovation comes from. But as the individual, then you've got to try it out, not just generically, but something that you can actually see in your workflow that's part of your work that you can genuinely see is of use. And I use it every day now, several times a day. It's just like breathing for me now.
Yeah.
It took me a while. I must admit, I was slow to it actually. In the specific generative AI setting, because I think maybe a lot of us were probably, I suspect, still skeptical of it. Even though we talk about it a lot, I still think I've been a relative cynic. Just for healthy reasons.
We've seen the practicalities of early chatbots, haven't we? Of it not understanding a question, and then all of a sudden you go onto ChatGPT or Gemini. And the majority of the questions that you're asking it does understand, and it is a big leap forward from
for sure.
Some of the things that I was certainly playing with 5 and 10 years ago.
You've got to experience the AI aha moment within your domain, within your sector, within your workflow, so that the light bulb comes on. And then at least you've just sparked that level of belief that this is useful, it's got utility.
Yeah.
The great news now is the learning, the upskilling, the courses, they're widespread. There's so many good channels on this. There's so many good platforms. There's so many that you can pick up on social media just to give yourself that next level of understanding. And the great news about it is it's the sort of thing that you can learn from doing. You don't need to be a data scientist with a PhD anymore.
No.
You need the right problem to solve, the right way of asking the question. It's not hard to become a competent prompt engineer. My kids do it. Then I suspect the rest of the toolkit for the individual is then imagine, as you said, they'll be limited by the imagination. What can this also do that your company's not doing this for yet? Just because you're not in the innovation team, just because you're not in the AI or the CTO office, whatever it is, you've got an opportunity here to be the innovator for your organization. Anyone can now be that, which is really inspiring. Yeah,
of course.
So that's something I think beyond what you've just seen to what could be. I think that's crucial. I think that curiosity point we've mentioned, it goes without saying, be attuned to the upside, but make sure you've got that approach to understanding the risk as well. Responsible way of doing this, thinking through the consequences of what you do, to focus on building trustworthy solutions that customers would use, your workforce would adopt as well. So I think to be a rounded person that's going to be useful, you need to not understand necessarily how the underlying architecture works, how the models work, but have a good understanding of the opportunities, the risk, how to govern it, how to harness it, how to put it to use in your context and give you those extra superpowers. With all those ingredients, you can really do some interesting things. And I've seen firsthand people reinvent their careers in the last year from just getting handy with the tech, which talk about putting your career into your own hands and reinventing yourself is more than I've seen happen in my entire career to date.
What do you think holds individuals and enterprises back? I mean, I've been out there talking to organisations and essentially selling a lot of quite cutting edge platforms.
Yeah.
And I've definitely run into a lot of resistance. Certainly when I've sold into sort of more creative fields.
Yeah.
What do you think it is that holds people back? Is it just the fear of the unknown? Is it just risk mitigation? Or is it just a disbelief of the upside to these kinds of technologies?
Well, I think there's plenty of data that shows the number of transformation projects that don't succeed. There's many factors in that, many of which are human factors. Maybe the tech wasn't the right choice in the first place. But I think at the heart of this is, unless you've got the workforce on side actively embracing it, it can't just be they abide by it. Yeah. And you certainly can't have it where they're against it. And in too many cases, the tech is just ignored, bypassed. People find workarounds. Keep thinking back to employee monitoring tools that were devised during lockdown that people always found a hack to get around. Yeah. So I think one of the ways I've seen these things successfully take off is when the technology is co-created with the workforce, not directed at them. Yeah. And if they're part of that journey to shape it, to apply it and evolve and develop it, they're far more likely to champion it, and you'll then see the benefits coming through. If it's just simply someone in the ivory tower saying this is going to happen by diktat, it's less likely to succeed.
Yeah, I think co-creation's a really good way of putting it, actually. I think that is where you see the adoption.
Now, and then, of course, from a company lens, you've got a few choices to make here. The good news is smaller companies now are able to access this compared to 10 years ago. It was just way beyond their price point, and they can get busy with this. They've got some choices to make, though, around this strategy of how they're going to take this forward. Do they want to be a pioneer, an innovator on the front foot, or do they want to be a fast follower? Do they want to train up, buy in the skills, outsource it? Do they want to build or buy? In terms of the standards, the ethics, the way they're approaching the guardrails, do they want to meet the sort of minimum best practice standards, or evolve even higher standards to get a degree of competitive advantage? There's a whole host of, choices on the sliding scale of how to shape your AI strategy now.
Yeah.
And crucially amongst that, though, it's not just the CIO's or CTO's responsibility. This requires everyone leaning in from across your entire C-suite. Mm-hmm. And increasingly, I'm spending time with non-execs and chairs who are realizing that this is not a hobby anymore. It's essential for them to be across this.
And they need to be able to advise those organisations.
For sure. So what they've got a duty to, of course, make sure they're holding the ExCo, the C-suite's feet to the fire to make sure they're innovating at sufficient pace to stay relevant in the future and beat the competition, but also make sure they're not moving so fast that they are exacerbating any risk factors, which are myriad, as we know from AI, and therefore finding this sort of Goldilocks phase in the middle that's moving just fast enough with the tech. Yeah. And I'm finding seriously the amount of non-execs showing interest in being upskilled in this is also very interesting too.
What do job specs start to look like?
I mean, I think you'd say job specs are probably already starting to live out their lifespan, aren't you? You're thinking about how the whole my old sector in recruitment has started to change already, and I think it's starting to become far more intuitive and skills based than chronology and career based than it ever was before, anyway. Yeah, and I suspect that's probably something we'll start to see fall out of fashion anyway, quite a bit. We're future gazing a bit here now. I don't know, but that's a sector that's ripe for transformation and change, and it's quite an exciting opportunity to reinvent that whole approach to talent, and fulfilling people's career aspirations. We haven't been through this cycle enough, have we? This is getting back to the early days of this whole revolution. We just don't know, and these are important questions to ask and sort of shape this so that we're in control of this outcome rather than just letting this happen to us, letting tech happen to us. I think which is back to that point earlier about critical thinking, about the different disciplines leaning into this topic. I've had the chance to network and work with people from all manner of different parts of academia, philosophy, extraordinary conversations happening about this in terms of the creative arts, and I think there's some really good work that probably doesn't get the attention it deserves. People sort of go for either the scare stories around this technology or the latest shiny development, and aren't maybe looking at some of these more profound questions. So I think these are things that actually there's some brilliant work happening on already. It's not that it's not getting addressed, it's just not getting the oxygen of publicity it probably deserves.